Hi, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Sedona International Film Festival live streaming. And I have the pleasure of being here with Larry Brand again today,
Right.
who has two films in the film festival,
Right.
the Coexist comedy tour and The Girl on the Train.
Correct.
I'm hearing a lot of buzz about the Coexist comedy tour.
Sure.
So please talk about it just a little.
Well, it was supposed to be a one-night shoot at a historic theater in Sacramento to demonstrate how the religions could coexist. We had a Jew, a Christian, a Hindu, a Muslim, a Buddhist, and an atheist comedian, and they each riff on themselves, on each other, and it's a kind of fun evening of camaraderie and ecumenicalism. And I thought it was a feel-good kind of film. So we shot the movie. It was going to be a concert release, and as I was cutting the picture, the Christian decided he didn't want to be part of the project anymore. And we never really found out why. There was some idea, did he want more money, but never really got a straight answer out of him. So now we're stuck with the Coexist comedy tour without a Christian. And I was on the phone with the atheist, who was one of the producers, and he said, well, could we do it without the Christian? And I'm saying, it's a Coexist comedy tour. I said, we could do it without you. But you can't very well have a religious coexistence without a Christian. You need a Jew, So we decided that the only way to make lemonade out of this lemon was to go in search of a funny Christian. So the movie is half concert movie, where we're showing the initial concert, and half searching America to find the funny replacement Christian that could finish our movie. So it really turned into a bigger project, and I think far more interesting project, because now all of a sudden you have narrative, you have a story. And we auditioned in LA, in New York, in Sacramento, and I went out to Jersey. So we were just we've kind of been handed one of those turns in a documentary that really helps you because it adds plot, even though it requires a lot more work.
Right.
Yeah.
And with this Christian dropping out,
Yeah.
did it make you question this coexistence?
Well, anybody who doesn't question coexistence hasn't been paying attention. We certainly haven't done very well at coexisting in general. My feeling is that human beings are tribal by nature. I think John Fugelsang makes that point in the film. And simpletons like Bill Maher, or people who kind of have a brief against religion, think that religion is the problem, as if somehow if religion evaporated, then the Israelis and the Palestinians, devoid of Judaism and Islam, would be getting along perfectly. Tribalism is encoded in the genes. And I think the point that Keith Lowell Jensen, the atheist in the show, makes is that it'll always be with us, but there are ways to act out without killing each other. I'm from the New York tribe, and there are people from the Boston tribe, and every few years we get together in a World Series, and very rarely does anybody get hurt. So it's naive to think that we get rid of religion, we're going to solve these problems, but I think there are ways to at least find peaceful ways to engage in tribalism.
And with that being said,
Sure.
You have done something really brilliant, because comedy is uniting.
Yeah.
More so than putting out this kind of hate message, or look
Sure.
at how powerful this is. And everyone that I had talked to yesterday, it was quite a few people, they're like, it really opened my eyes up to what we're really facing in society, and have for eternity. Like, this is not a new concept. Do you have high hopes that this is gonna win the festival this year?
Well, I'm just happy to be in a festival, and I'm happy when the festival is well attended, and this festival is really well attended. We have 2 movies here, and we had 4 screenings, and they were all sold out. And not just my picture. I think most of the pictures I've seen have been either sell out or close to sell out. And I think for filmmakers, that's really the thing that you want to you don't want to travel cross country and then have 5 people be in the theater and 2 of them are your grandparents.
Exactly.
So, I don't think you go into these things expecting an award, or, if you get one, that's great. We've won a bunch of awards on the 3 movies that we've made with our company, 8180 Films, including this one, and Girl on the Train, and Christine, our first movie. And it's great, and it's fun, but it's really more about getting the word out. And the picture itself is by no means touchy-feely. They are, they are getting along, with the exception of the the guy who left the show. But they're quite acerbic with each other. I mean, Moshe Kasher, who's the Jewish comedian in it, is just wildly acerbic, and it's not for the faint of heart. This movie, they're pretty rough on each other, but I think there's a deeper level of respect for each other and affection for each other that I think transcends that. I mean, the idea that we're going to coexist and it's always going to be, you know, kind of a love fest is also very, very naive. It's never going to be that. And you know, Moshe is very abrasive, and Sammy the Buddhist is very easygoing and very fun. And they're all very funny, which is obviously, you know, that's the
basis.
Sine qua non of a comedy movie, is that it'd be funny. You know, I think we simply want people to enjoy the movie. I mean, we're filmmakers first, and we're not trying to change the world. We're trying to give you an hour and a half that you're laughing, and if you think beyond that, and it's true with a movie like Girl on the Train. If you're engaged, if you're curious about where the next turn is going to happen, if you're trying to figure out what the next plot twist is going to be or how things are going to pay off, then that's great. If you're sucked into the deeper meanings of it, what it's really about and the philosophies behind it, then that's so much better.
Right.
But ultimately, you have to be entertained for an hour and a half.
Switching gears,
sure.
Because you've mentioned Girl on the Train.
Sure.
It's film noir.
It is film noir.
Is that a passion of yours?
Well, I think, you know, the nice thing about having two movies in this festival is that most filmmakers, I think, really want to be versatile. I mean, if you look at somebody like Martin Scorsese, and he's usually associated with violent, dark pictures. He's made musicals. He's made comedies. King of Comedy is like a comic version of Taxi Driver, really.
Yes.
The themes are very similar. I think we tend to want to stretch. I think when you are successful in one arena, like horror or thrillers, you are kind of pigeonholed, which is not a bad thing. I mean, no one who gets paid to make movies should complain about being pigeonholed, because at least you're making movies. But you always want to branch out. But I would say if I had a favorite kind of film to make, it's neo-noir, film noir in the tradition of the Coen Brothers and Quentin
Absolutely.
and yeah, that kind of
Are they, are Quentin Tarantino and the Coen Brothers maybe a little idol of yours?
Well, you know, nobody ever will admit anybody's an idol,
Yeah.
especially somebody of contemporaries. Generally, the idols are people who are already dead. So I'll wait until one of us dies first, and we'll figure that out.
Okay.
But I certainly respect them, and I think they're the premier filmmakers of our day. I think certainly the Coens with I can't think of a better movie in the last 20 years than No Country for Old Men. It was so brave. I mean, the way they deconstructed the genre, and even to the point of having the hero die off camera, which I think is the most brilliant thing I've seen in film ever. And I'm thinking, you know, if I'd had that opportunity, would I have had the balls to do that? And I don't know that I would. I think it was just I think they're out there. They're probably the leading edge of kind of deconstruction film noir. And they started with Blood Simple. So I'd say certainly, but I've been as influenced by my contemporaries as by the filmmakers of the past, like Hitchcock. And, you know, and guys who are, you know, earlier generation, but still making films like Scorsese.
Well, I haven't seen Girl on the Train.
Right.
The music behind it has gotten some buzz as well.
Interesting, yeah.
That people are noticing.
Yeah.
So how did you come up with the score?
Well, I didn't. The composer Alexander Janko is a terrific composer. He did My Big Fat Greek Wedding. He's done much bigger projects than ours, but you know, we have an association with him because through my producers, they all live in Michigan, and I met him, and we got along very well, and he liked the project, and we thought his composition was excellent. I think with composers, you know, it's all about the writing. I mean, you can change orchestration, but I'm not a musician. I can't rewrite music. So it's always a bit of a surprise because you never know what you're getting. You do a temp track, and you don't want to impose that on the composer. It just gives him an idea of what direction you're going in. And with Zandy Janko, he got the movie. He got into the film. And one of the things he did, there are sequences that are actually performed rubato, which means he's playing along with the character speaking, which, you know, as opposed to simply composing a score and fitting it within that time frame of we're starting here and we're ending here. And what that does is it gives you a more intimate connection between the person speaking on camera and the music. And it's subtle, and it's kind of very It's not something that you should notice. You should be paying attention to what he's saying. But I think it underscores in a very naturalistic way, so that he's actually kind of playing along with the actors as if it were kind of a performance piece. So it just gives it a little more life and a little more naturalness. That was his call. That wasn't mine. He explained it. I never heard the term before. So my only contribution was I would, kind of, you say, well, why don't we cut here rather than there? Or why don't we use this piece here rather than there? So, but the credit for the score is all his.
Fantastic.
Sure.
I want to open up the room here to several other questions that we have. Please, does someone have a question? Yes. Yes.
So as young students, we're always curious as to how people actually got started and how you got your foot in the door. So my question is, how did you get the opportunity to be the production assistant for the legendary Orson?
Okay. Now, even though you were asking, I should be talking to you because of the cameras.
You can actually just talk to the camera.
Otherwise, they're going to be looking at the side of my head. No, I can face. I'll talk to you. It just kind of fell into it. I was a friend of mine had the job before me, and he fell into it because he knew a producer who knew Orson was looking for a driver, and it seemed like a great opportunity. I can't say I took advantage of it. I'm kind of embarrassed to say I hadn't seen Citizen Kane at the point where I was working for Orson Welles, so I was kind of an idiot. I grew up hearing about the legendary War of the Worlds because I wanted to be an astronomer and a physicist when I was a kid. So I actually knew more about that science or the kind of putative invasion from Mars because you read about it in all these astronomy books. So I really didn't have the tools to kind of quiz him or question him or learn something from him the way I think somebody that would have been my filmmaker friends who imbibed movies as a kid would have taken advantage. And I can't say it afforded me any leg up in terms of the industry, but it certainly showed me a behind-the-scenes look at a great genius of our time, and I felt that I could learn things, at least sometimes, almost what not to do, because he was so brilliant, but he also had such a troubled career, and he was always on output. He was very forceful, as most geniuses are. But it was interesting to see him in his later years, and how I think there were points in his earlier career where he may have had a greater, longer body of work. He made a lot of really good movies.
Right.
Not that he only made Citizen Kane. I mean, I love F for Fake, which is a kind of early precursor to documentaries that aren't really documentaries. It's a brilliant movie. But I certainly it was a great footnote to my career, other than probably every time I do an interview, people are going to say, "What about Orson Welles?" But it was a great experience.
Very cool.
Sure.
Anyone else have a question?
Who's one of your biggest influences? As a child, who was that motivated you to get into this business, get started, and follow your passion?
Sure. I think one way that I differ from other writers or writer-directors is my influences aren't only other filmmakers. They certainly are. Hitchcock. I mean, Psycho is probably my favorite movie of all time. Also one of the most groundbreaking movies of all time.
Absolutely.
And certainly, I think every filmmaker has an affection for Kubrick. I think, if for no other reason, that we all want a perfect representation of what's in our brain to be on the screen, and we all have that sense. I'm sure Kubrick didn't think that he accomplished it either, but I think we look at his movies and think he did it. He actually got exactly what he wanted on the screen, and I think that so he's kind of a hero of pretty much everybody. But also, like I said, contemporaries like the Coens and people who came a little bit before, like Scorsese. But I was also very, very influenced by TV shows, that weird TV shows like Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, which always had a twist ending, which I loved. So a lot of the influences I had were not purely film. As a writer, I'm probably more influenced by Walker Percy, who's my favorite novelist, than any screenwriter. Screenwriters, of course, Bill Goldman and Paddy Chayefsky and people like that as well. But also novelists, even though I'm by no means a Shakespeare scholar, but I got enough of the taste of that in school to understand the rhythms of language, and to understand that rhythms of language are very, very important. It's not simply about conveying a utilitarian requirement in a scene. Well, I have to get this information there. It's about the rhythms and how you do that. I was very influenced by my favorite rock poet, Jim Morrison. A lot of the stuff that I write, almost every movie I've ever done, there's a line that I've stolen or mimicked from one of his songs, and sometimes you notice it, sometimes you don't. In fact, at the end of Girl on the Train, there's a kind of long descriptive piece that Mickey Acox, as the lead character, records and sends to the hero. And I initially scored that to the end. I took the loop from the beginning of the song by the Doors to the end, and I created like a loop that stretched across the entire speech, because you didn't want to hear the words, you just want to hear the song, the music. And then I gave that to Zandy Janko, and it doesn't sound anything like it now. But that was kind of inspired, because it was more like, it became more like a song than just a speech. Even though it was a speech, it has that kind of musical. So the rhythms of language that I get from, ranging from Shakespeare to Jim Morrison, that's a pretty big range. But that's as important for me when I'm constructing dialogue as another screenwriter might do.
And I think that shows, because the two movies you have here are nothing alike.
Nothing alike, no.
And that's the brilliance of it. You get to draw from all of those different influences, and that's important.
Yeah. And they each inform each other. I think being a filmmaker informed my ability to make a documentary, because I understand narrative. And when we were handed this problem with the Christian leaving the show, all of a sudden what became a concert piece was now a narrative. It was a story. Right. And we had plot points. I could actually look at that movie and say, this is the end of Act 1, this is the end of Act 2, which you can often usually do in a feature film, even though I don't, as a writer, I don't consciously sit there saying, well, where's my act break going to be? I mean, you read books about filmmaking and or screenwriting, and you get this impression that we sit there and think. But if you actually look at most of the movies I've done, probably all the movies I've done, they kind of naturally have, points where plot points turn, and you get your Act 2 and your Act 3. So.
Did I see a question? Oh, go ahead, Miranda.
Yeah.
Please.
Being this segment that represents the horror industry in this town.
Sure.
Do you have any horror projects in the works?
Well, I actually did get an idea for a horror movie. I haven't done one really since Halloween Resurrection, and that one, of course, I didn't direct, and it was rewritten, so it's not. I don't have the same affection for it that I would for Girl on the Train or The Drifter, my first movie I did, or anything like that. But I haven't done it in a while, and I do have an idea, which I'm not going to expose yet. But yeah, I am thinking along those lines. I mean, after doing a movie that nobody dies in, like Coexist, I've got to get back to got to start killing people.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Kind of going back to Halloween. What
Sure.
is it like to actually write a remake?
Well, it wasn't a remake; it was a sequel.
Oh, okay.
Sequel, yeah.
Well, what was that like?
Well, I had to go back and this is about 10 years ago, so I've never owned a VHS machine for my, because I hated it. Now DVDs look pretty good, but back in the day, in the 80s and 90s, I just thought they looked horrible. So even though I had all these movies that were available on VHS, I never actually had a VHS machine. So I went out and I think I borrowed one or I bought one, and I looked at all the earlier Halloweens, with the exception of Halloween 3, because that was really a whole other movie. And I just refamiliarized myself with the genre and with Michael Myers, and it's weird to say, I wasn't a huge fan. I mean, I thought the original one was great, and Carpenter was a good filmmaker, but the sequels I didn't think, with the exception of H2O, I thought H2O was a pretty good sequel. And so we ignored 5 and 6, which were the ones that went off into a whole kind of weird dimension that a few people liked, but I think most people kind of hate. Yeah. I hated the supernatural aspect. And Absolutely. Mustafa Akkad, the producer who produced the original and was the producer on all of them, who, as an aside, speaking of Coexistence, I don't know if everybody knows it, he was killed in a terrorist bomb. He and his daughter were at a wedding in probably Lebanon. I think he was from Lebanon, about 6 or 7 years ago, and we would not have heard. It was another bombing that wouldn't have really made the headlines, other than the fact that he had been there. So he died in a terrorist bombing, which was terribly tragic. And his son Malik, who was one of the producers on the movie, is a friend of mine. I mean, it was just a horrible, So Malik lost his sister and his father in that. But Mustafa was very very certain about not. He didn't like super. I don't know why he let the supernatural thing in there at all, because he was very much. Michael Myers is just very tough. You know, he's really hard to kill. He's not supernatural. He's not a ghost. He's just really hard to kill.
Right.
And that's, I guess, willing suspension of disbelief. So you know, we had these kind of ground rules, and I thought Halloween 7 was a pretty good. H2O was a pretty good movie actually, and so we kind of took off. We started up where that one. We actually wanted LL Cool J to be in the movie because he was not only is he a good actor, they loved him. He's a very nice guy. From everything I've heard, they just adored him, and so he had gone on his career. He wasn't available, so we got Busta Rhymes, who's also a very sweet guy. I like Busta Rhymes a lot, actually. But yeah, it was typical. I had this idea floating around, and I pitched it as a potential for Halloween, and the rest was
history.
The rest was history. But what was interesting about it was, from the writer's standpoint, I'd written a very obscure and very talky, which is not unusual for me. A kind of arty thriller that Malik Akkad had seen and really liked. And he showed it to his father. And honestly, I don't think his father understood 5 sentences in the movie. But he thought the writing, he got the sense that it was good, maybe because of the rhythms, I don't know. And through that very weird, offbeat movie script, I got the biggest job of my life. So sometimes when you do something, it's just purely from the heart. You don't know if this is ever going to get made. You don't know if it has any commercial appeal at all. If you invest yourself in it, it still can lead to really, really good things.
So that's the whole following your passion.
Absolutely.
And so many of us don't do that, even as creatives.
Sure.
We kind of get off track. So this is a success story of yours.
Well, yeah, I think if I had set out to I'm going to come up with something that's going to appeal to the Halloween guy, I don't think I could have done that. I had set out to do something that I just thought was a really cool idea, and it wound up appealing to the Halloween guy. So, the notion, and I think a lot of people starting out, and even people with more experience, think that they can kind of create a commercial movie. Nobody knows what's commercial. I mean, it's a famous line. I think it started, I heard it from Mario Van Peebles, who directed a movie I wrote a few years ago, and he'd heard it from Clint Eastwood, and I think it started with Bill Goldman, that nobody knows anything about what's going to sell. I'm paraphrasing. And it's true. You really don't know. If you write something you like, you're invested in it, it's going to be better than writing something that you think is going to be commercial. There's no way to predict that.
Correct. If there aren't any other questions, I want him to plug his. Did you have a question?
We were talking about this. We're students from ASU.
Sure.
So maybe a question that I was interested in is just with what you were saying about like having the passion and the drive. Like, what would you say keeps you like moving forward to like keep that passion and keep that drive? Like, as students, like, what do you think?
Well, I don't think. I think you either have it or you don't. It's like forcing something to be commercial. You can't. If you have it, you know you have it. And very few people in my business retire. They die, Sidney Lumet made a particularly fresh and original. I forgot that Lumet had directed Until the Devil Knows You're Dead. And I saw it, and I forgot that Lumet, and I thought it was like a new director. I didn't even realize it was an 82-year-old guy. So I think that if you have the passion, you probably have it throughout your life, as long as you're physically and mentally, there. I don't think it ever goes away. I think the thing when you're starting out as a filmmaker is you may not know where your passion lies. And I think if you think, a lot of people don't remember or even know that Jack Nicholson started out as a writer. And in those days, in the 60s, he worked for Corman, of course, Roger Corman famously. People would do everything. They would put themselves, we need another actor. Well, let's get him put in front of a camera. And that was really the way to do it. That's what film school should really be all about. I have a friend who's in film school and she wants to do documentaries. And like last week, they said, well, our actress dropped out. We need to star in our little short. So bang, she's in the movie. And I think that's really, really helpful. I didn't know when I moved to Hollywood if I was going to be an actor or a writer or a director. I knew I was interested in writing and I wound up doing all three. And acting informed me in terms of how to talk to actors and the pressures they're under. And writing, of course, informs directing because I was very directorial when I wrote. But I think that it's really important. You may think you want to be a cinematographer and discover you love editing. You may think you want to be an actress and discover you like writing, or vice versa. And I think that's the best thing you can get out of film school is they can't teach you to be a filmmaker. They really can't. They can expose you to the elements of film so you can discover what it is about film that you really love and where your talents really lie. That's the best thing. And of course, you form relationships and you crew up with other people. I have a friend a few years ago, he did a short for $250. He bought a camera on Friday, he returned it on Monday. We shot the short over the weekend. He got every filmmaker he knows, and some of them were pretty, had done pretty big movies, producers and directors and the cinematographer. I don't know how many movies he'd shot, 40 movies or something. And we're all crewing up to help this guy do this, $250 short. And my job was I was a boom operator, and I was a gopher. I would get sandwiches and burritos and stuff. And I loved it. I had a great time. I loved the responsibility of just having to hold the boom rather than have to worry about directing and doing 20 other things. But the real reason I loved it was I loved being on a set. So if you want me to be in your student film, I'll be happy to be in your student film. If you like film, you just like being on a set. You like doing what you're doing. And you always support your friends. And you support them not just because they're your friends, but because you really enjoy the process of making film. I mean, I walk by, I live in New York and LA. I go back and forth. And in New York, a lot of times you'll see, more so than in LA actually, you'll see people shooting TV shows or films on the street or in Central Park. And I was thinking, if the director just dropped dead right now, they could just stick me in there and I could, but you just like being on the set. So that helps. Sure.
All right. Do you have a question?
Any thoughts, any stories to share about Corman?
Wow. The only thing I can say about Roger is everything you've ever heard about him is true. Roger is like the quirky, crazy uncle that gives you money to go make your movie. So, I don't know anybody that's going to ever badmouth Roger in a serious way, because he was really, he was such a benefactor to 3 generations of filmmakers. And he's still making films. And now his son, who was a teenager back when I was doing my movies in the late 80s, is now, I think, running the operation. But Roger, of course, was legendary for his cheapness. But the difference between Roger and, studio cheap people is that Roger was still at heart a filmmaker. And I did a movie called Overexposed. I wrote it with Rebecca, who's my producing partner and writing partner. And there were 2 sex scenes in the movie. And the first one I hated. It was gratuitous. And it sucked all the energy out of the second one, which I thought was pretty good. We got a body double who was into it, and it was pretty hot. And I don't like sex scenes. I don't think too many directors really do. I almost wanted like a clause in my contract that no nudity, mine or anybody else.
I concur. Yes, I concur.
Yeah, and in Girl on Train there isn't. That's a different kind of movie anyway. So I really hated this first one, and we had a different body double, and they didn't even really match. And the
Whoops.
Yeah, well, there was just the reality of the timing and everything. But then the actress Catherine Oxenberg agreed with me. So now I've got to talk Roger into taking a nude scene out of a movie that he's paid for. Okay, 2 problems: nudity, which he likes in movies, and he's paid for it. So I just girded my loins and I just walked in, and I'd had the speech all prepared, and I gave them exactly the argument I'm giving you. The other scene is really good, and this sucks all the energy out of that scene. And the body double doesn't work, and she doesn't even look like the same person, and Catherine doesn't like it, and we want the lead actress to be happy to support the movie. And he actually let me cut it out of the movie. And I thought, he is at heart a filmmaker, because he kind of got what I was talking about. And he would do that. And there's a couple of incidents in the rolling credits and the end of Mask of the Red Death, which a crawl cost a lot more money than cards. And he let me do it because he knew it was right for the movie. It cost an extra couple of $1,000. But I think my favorite one, which kind of ties in with Orson, when I was working for Orson once, he told me to go to some place and pick up, I don't remember what it was. I was always running around with canisters of, I mean, the most interesting thing, I was actually carrying around canisters of Other Side of the Wind, his incomplete masterpiece, and I remember he was giving me directions, and I already knew how to, and I just wanted to get going, you know. So I was kind of like antsy to get going, and I was just like an arrogant kid, and he got angry, he got really pissed at me. He said, you were rude and arrogant, and so 10 years later, I'm making a movie for Roger Corman, and it was Mask of the Red Death, and there was a scene where it wasn't particularly violent, but a guy has like his head in a vice, and you just hear a crack. There's no actual blood or anything, and you hear the crack, and Roger says, well, Larry, I think you should tone down the violence in that scene and maybe turn that down a little bit. And I just looked at him, and I said, well, you know, I can retire now. And he gave me a look. I said, well, I've been called rude and arrogant by Orson Welles, and I've been told to tone down the violence by Roger Corman. And he, of course, had no idea what I was talking about Orson Welles, but he just gave me that kind of quizzical look, and you know, so. Well, absolutely. In fact, my only association with Sedona before coming here was putting Orson on a plane every few weeks or a few months to come to Sedona. So the only memory I have of the word Sedona was when I was working for Orson and I was driving into the airport to go to Sedona. So absolutely. But I didn't know she still lives here.
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, interesting.
I used to work for a while.
Interesting, yeah.
It was funny because I knew that she was Orson's daughter. And
oh, wow.
yeah, she walks into the office and pops it on the table. And I'm like, what is that? And she's like, well, what does it look like? And I was just, oh my God. It was awesome.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Very cool.
But, yeah.
So, 2 films in the festival.
Correct.
Are the screenings, you have more screenings coming up this week?
They are done.
They are done.
They are
They
done.
were sold out.
They were sold out.
They can catch trailers at your website?
Yeah, 8180films.com.
8180films.com.
And
your Twitter address?
Just 8180films.com.
8180films.com. You can
Yeah,
catch
definitely,
up with it
when
on
it comes
there.
to Twitter, I'm a total Luddite. I like the new technology for film, the digital and all that stuff, but when it comes to Twitter, I'm outside of my... But the Coexist is actually available for download on iTunes and Amazon and Walmart, and the DVDs just came out from Kino Lorber, which have extra features and more comedy bits, so that's also available, and more behind-the-scenes type stuff, which is kind of fun. And Girl on the Train will be coming out theatrically, I believe, at the end of summer through Monterey Media.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
So please support the filmmakers. That's where it's really at. Go to Amazon. Go to all those places.
Sure.
You can hook it up with 8180.com. You can
8180films.com.
8180films.com,
Right.
so you can reach out to those links.
Sure.
Really important that we keep these guys in business or we don't get filmed.
Right.
So thanks for sitting
Well,
with
thank
me
you.
for the
No, it's
last
my
little
pleasure.
bit. I
Had a
really
great time.
appreciate it.
I had a great time.
And we'll talk to you next time.